And joining me now with more as the year gets underway is Andy Walden. He's Vice President of Research and Analysis at Intercontinental Exchange, or ICE for short. Andy, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Always great to have you in studio, of course, one of our resident expert guests. How does housing look as we start 2025?
Yeah, and as you know, there have been two key components we've been talking about in housing: affordability and interest rate dynamics, and the inventory dynamics out there in the market. Affordability is still a challenge as we enter this year. We know interest rates have taken a leg up. It's going to take some time for that affordability dynamic to improve and normalize over time. From an inventory perspective, that's where we're seeing some of the bright spots in the housing market. We entered at this point last year at a 36% deficit in terms of the number of homes available for sale. That was cut to 22% throughout the year. That's the best level we've seen since 2020. So as we enter the spring buying season, still pretty strong demand out there in the market and more housing out there for folks to shop amongst as well.
Inventory, some help there is definitely
Finally, right?
A good thing. Exactly. And we see data indicating that home prices have been on the rise, at least toward the end of 2024,
Sure.
with those November home prices, according to ICE data, up 3.3%. What was behind that?
Yeah, there's a couple of different drivers there, and that's a pickup from 3.1% the month prior, so you're seeing what appears to be a little bit of reacceleration out there in the market. Some of that is true, right? If you look at the underlying data, part of this is being driven by August and September. We know that mortgage rates got down to the near 6% range as we headed into that first rate cut. That did provide a little bit of strength for demand and a little bit of strength for home prices as we got into October and November of last year. So that's part of why you're seeing that little bit of a pickup. The other piece is just simply what happened a year ago. When we look at that year-over-year home price growth rate, it's simply where are prices today, where were they last year? And when you look at that movement over time, we're now comparing to the fourth quarter of 2023. It got really soft at that point last year. That's where we saw the highest rates in this cycle. We saw mortgage rates get above 7.5%, near 8%. Saw demand soften a little bit, prices soften. And so when you look at that year-over-year comparison, part of the reason that you're seeing what looks like acceleration in home price growth is just simply because we have weaker prices from a year ago. That should shift a little bit as we move into early 2025.
I'm curious about that as we make this shift, Andy, in terms of what this could portend as to what is to come.
Yeah, and when you look at that annual price growth rate, I think you could see another step up here as we get into December, right? We were still relatively weak in the fourth quarter in December 2023. But when you look at what's happening on the ground right now, and you look at November, you mentioned seasonally November is a little bit weaker. When you pull that seasonality out, and if you annualize that and said, what if we saw November happen for 12 consecutive months, it would be positive 2.7%. That's less than the plus 3.3% we're seeing right now. And so that suggests that all else the same, and things could move if interest rates move lower, you could see demand pick up. But you could see after a couple of months of that rate picking up, you could see that soften a little bit again as we move into the early stages of 2025.
Talk to me more about what we're seeing on a geographic basis in different markets around the country.
Yeah, and that story really hasn't changed all that much, right? It's the Midwest and Northeast remain strong, right? The Midwest, you're seeing relative affordability, not only compared to other areas of the country, but when you compare each market to its long-run average, you're seeing better home affordability in the Midwest. That's improving demand a little bit. When you look at the Northeast, the story is just a lack of supply and very slow return of supply. And so those are the areas that have been leading the country in terms of home price growth. I think it's reasonable to expect that to continue as we move into early 2025. And then when you look at some of the softer areas, it's the Southeast, right? You look at a quarter of markets are now back to normal levels of inventory. 15% more could join that list this year if current trends hold true. They're primarily in the southeastern part of the country. Florida stands out. Texas stands out as some of the softer areas from a price perspective. And you could see other areas of the Southeast soften up a little bit as that inventory returns as well.
How can our viewers use ICE services to help them with this process?
It's a really good question. In all likelihood, they already are, right? Whether it's a home seller listing their home on the multiple listing service or a buyer searching for homes on the MLS, whether they're going through the origination process, taking out a loan, shopping for the best rate, or they've already bought a home and they're making their mortgage payments through their servicing system or are working in their online platform, they're likely interacting with our technology whether they know it or not. And that's kind of the vision of the ICE Mortgage Technology Group, is similar to the New York Stock Exchange where we sit here today, right? It's a transactional, it brings buyers and sellers together. It creates efficiency and trust in that trading process. The same thing is taking place behind the scenes in terms of ICE Mortgage Technology, creating that end-to-end ecosystem, creating transparency, ease, and cost effectiveness throughout that entire process.
Lastly, Andy, what do you think is the best way for people to look at the housing market throughout 2025 when making their own investing decisions?
Yeah, it's a good question. Obviously, one of the biggest financial decisions folks make, it tends to be a very emotional decision when you're going through the home buying process as well. And I think that's where that data can come in and really be effective for folks, taking that emotional component away. Obviously, the reason the data is important is to make stronger, better, faster, more impactful decisions, both in your investing space and in your own personal life. And so utilizing all of that data that's now at your fingertips to make the most effective and efficient and intelligent decisions when you're making that home purchase.
Andy Walden, he's Vice President of Research and Analysis at the New York Stock Exchange's parent company, Intercontinental Exchange, or ICE for short. Andy, thank you as always.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
It's great to have you.
Yeah.